The following video is sponsored by Keeps. Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today with the final verdict for Elden Ring. This is without a doubt a generational video game. It feels like everyone around us in our lives are playing or talking about Elden Ring. So why not add one more discussion into the mix? For those who haven't been tracking it closely, I have my impressions on this channel from when the embargo lifted just 2 days ahead of the launch of Elden Ring. It was my thoughts after 50 hours with the game, and since then, I've more than doubled my hours, finishing the game at 103 hours. And don't worry, I haven't stopped playing since then, so that hour count is only going up. But I feel like now I'm in a comfortable position to say, this is it. This is the final review for Elden Ring here on this channel. Now, this is with the idea in mind that I am expecting people to know my general thoughts from my impressions video when watching this one. So you may notice me being much more critical in this review than maybe the impressions video, because a lot has changed since then. I still love the game, don't get it twisted, but a lot has changed since then. But also, I'm expecting you to know that I spent almost a half hour just gushing about this game straight up. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another Elden Ring video. I'm sure it's inescapable at this point. And before we get started, a word from our sponsor.
Whoa! What are you doing here, man? This is my studio space. Well, now that I got you here, hey, you may have noticed a little bit of a different cut from Matty. Some people like it, some people hate it, some people say go back to the 90s, Matty. To that I say, you like hair in general, right? Well, since you decided to break into my studio space for whatever reason, allow me to tell you all about Keeps.
Keeps has you covered, just like I have you covered when I remind you all that Knights of the Old Republic is the best RPG ever made and nothing will top it. It's the same mindset from Keeps, except with your hair. So our missions absolutely intertwine here. Do you know that 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35? It's time to get ahead of the game. I'm not talking about that video game, but don't worry, you can still play that. Stay at home, because Keeps can deliver straight to your door doctor-recommended plans and treatments at half the cost of the traditional pharmacy. And what's great is, again, stay home, because 24/7 care and support is available online, making all of your hair goals a reality. So, hair loss stops with Keeps. To get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/MrMatty or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/MrMatty. When I talked about Elden Ring in my impressions video, I said that it was the Breath of the Wild moment for this series. I was wrong. It was the Skyrim moment. That is the best way to describe this game, in my humble opinion. This game, from top to bottom, just reminds me of the zeitgeist that was Skyrim when it came out. The inescapable nature of it on a social level, but also on a design front. So many ideas, clear as day, that you're going to see emulated throughout game development for years and years to come. And of course, that means shoddy imitations will follow suit. But what we have here is a video game that goes against the AAA norm in every single sense of its design, and has left developers, fans, and critics all entirely befuddled. The game doesn't force feed you tutorials. The game trusts your knowledge to figure things out. And because of that, the game is excellent, since throughout every step of the world, there is a sense of discovery. You'll get into your 100th hour of this game and learn something new about it, whether it be about your build, how an item works, the lore of the game. It just constantly keeps unfolding over and over and over, delivering to you something new. And a big part of this is thanks to the unprecedented sense of danger that Elden Ring boasts. As I'm sure you've already heard before, you're going to die a lot in this game. And that makes sense, because when you read a quote from Miyazaki when talking to the New Yorker, he said this: "When I'm playing these games, I think this is the way I'd want to die, in a way that's amusing or interesting, or that creates a story I can share. Death and rebirth, trying and overcoming, we want that cycle to be enjoyable. In life, death is a horrible thing. In play, it can be something else." And that philosophy permeates throughout the entire design of the game. And especially in an open world, you could die in some really unique ways. It starts off when you take your first step out, and you realize, unlike any other Souls-born Kiro game out there, you can't have a wall to your back, where those games were typically, in comparison, much more claustrophobic, closed in. You could put your back to a wall to keep yourself safe, so at least all you could see was in front of you that would be threatening you. However, with Elden Ring, you step out and the danger could arrive from anywhere. When you mix in together the idea that a boss fight could strike at any moment, a dragon flying in from the sky to the tree sentinel waiting right out front, the first ever grace point in the game, this title is constantly challenging you every step of the way, and it is an absolute joy to overcome. Yet it's still rewarding. The Souls genre always boasted level design that rewards exploration. Every additional bit of effort you get is paid back in full. Now imagine that, but in an open world. That's where the magnum opus statements originate from for this game, because it takes all of these things we've seen in Bloodborne, Sekiro, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, and melds them together into this one cohesive vision that all these lessons they've learned from release to release to release have been put into here. So exploration, it feels like the map was just a bunch of little Lego blocks clicked together, and it's much more rewarding because of that, because at the end of every stretch is something, a new Ash of War, a new spell, a new boss, a new piece of loot, armor, weapons, and items, etc. It's just constantly rewarding you with new, exciting things. The reason I start with all this, and it may sound a bit familiar for those of you who watch my impressions video, is because as I've learned after 100 hours with the game, is the progress scaling for this game is phenomenal. Enemies that were tough bosses in the beginning of the game become common enemies as you get deeper and deeper and deeper. And it really reminds you like, hey, look how far you've come. That enemy that was giving you trouble that you died to like 20 times, look at you now. He's a common enemy to you. That's how far you've come. And it's not uncommon for Souls genre games to remind you of your progress in this way. But for Elden Ring, a game that you're going to be spending dozens and dozens and dozens of hours in, that progress feels so good because you're in the thick of it for so long. Better yet though, much like the game that I think clearly inspired it in a number of ways, Skyrim, this game doesn't lock you into a build. So when you pick your starting class, there is an importance there that's going to define the first, I'd say 20% of your real adventure. But then you can eventually unlock respecking. And it's there that you can really tailor your build thanks to the larval tiers as much as you'd like. And interestingly in this game, they don't just give you all of your souls back, or in this case runes, they give you a level count back. So you just recount all of your stats as much as you want. This system is great. I went from a pretty weak and terrible faith build to a much better faith build that carried me to the end game. And then once I beat the game, I tried out that blood build that everyone's been talking about. And don't worry, we'll get into the bleed effect in this game later on in some of my criticisms. However, I cannot emphasize enough how great this game feels that I don't have to start a brand new character. I don't have to pay any type of currency. I can just go, respec. I can try out a bunch of new spells, tools, etc. that are available to me, especially because you can loot bell bearings, which you can then take back to the Lost Grace point, where you can then have unlimited resources to upgrade all the weapons. So the game does a good job of making it tough to get those resources, but you can obtain them and shape your adventure however you'd like. And that is a powerful feeling in a game this difficult, because it'll still smack you down no matter what. I didn't talk about the Ashes of War system much in my original preview of the game, but oh my god, I really like this one a lot because it highlights how diverse the weapon combos and sets in this game are. So you'll have things like the Winged Scythe, which has the Angel Wings ability that will disable healing for your enemy. This is really useful in certain circumstances. However, you can also get seppuku, which can put bleeding on a weapon, and when you have a fast weapon that does a ton of damage, the amount of bleeding you can proc is nutty. And there's just so many customization options here, but the way they have a rule set in this system is what makes it really interesting. For example, if you have a legendary weapon with a legendary effect, you cannot tweak that weapon and change out its Ash of War. So this is typically reserved for standard weapons, which are viewed as the weaker ones, but with the ability to put, say, Frost on it, and then put Seppuku on it, and then upgrade it. Now it's taking on the form of its own legendary. Sometimes the weapons that you craft on your own, if you will, are better than the legendary ones, and that is again, really awesome feeling. The other thing I didn't really highlight a lot that was very obviously awesome in this game are the hitboxes. Wow, there were some moments that someone just went clear over my head, and in any other game, it's like, yeah, I would have been hit there just because video games. But this game respects the hitbox so much that these fights, like when I don't get hit, I'm like, that wasn't BS, like you missed by a hair. And the fact that the game accounts for that is just a real respect for the player's talent. It's not about iframes constantly. It's like sometimes the enemy will miss. They'll miss by this much, but they'll miss. So yes, this game is still to me incredible. It's still my game of the year. It's still a generational game to me. It's still From Software's magnum opus. I absolutely adore it because all I can say really is that I can put 100+ hours into a game, no problem. I have no problem doing that if the game is good. But typically, it's a slow burn. I don't remember, even with Persona 5 Royal, which is a game I absolutely adore more than anything, okay? I don't remember any game that I've sunk 100+ hours into this quickly, and had to maintain other aspects of my life just ever so delicately so I didn't throw it all the way to Elden Ring. This game is powerful, man. There's nothing quite like it. But now with that positive front, I gotta get into some criticism of the game. And you'll see, just know this second half of the video, I'm gonna have to show you some on-screen examples to represent what I'm talking about. Because I know the FromSoft community is a bit more defensive, and I feel like seeing is believing rather than me just sitting here and talking about it and spouting nonsense. So just know you are gonna see some later game stuff at this point, because this is honestly the part of the game that is where some thoughts changed. I want to talk about the summons in Elden Ring. We can undoubtedly create our own rule sets to define the experiences in any video game. For example, in Fallout, I remember doing an unarmed run because I could. It's a neat showcase of how the game allows you to do something. However, just because it allows it doesn't mean that it was the intention of the design. And with that said, I believe many of Elden Ring's boss fights were designed with a summon in mind. Now, don't get it twisted, FromSoft fans. This isn't coming from someone who's bad at the games, okay? I'm not sitting here whining. But the reason I'm talking about this is not because I felt I leaned on them hard, although there were instances like that in the Radahn boss fight I felt was a particular one. But rather, it's because some victories felt a little bit more cheap than they should have. Again, this is where the personal rule sets come in. Some people will say to me, well, do no summons, Matty, if it feels cheap to you. And it's like, when you go into the boss arenas and you see them covering the ground with fast, crazy movesets, you sometimes do need a summon to take the heat off of you. And you can deny it as long as you would like, but this is something that is a part of the design of the game. There are 100% bosses in Elden Ring that expect you to summon. Doesn't mean you can't beat them without it. Of course not, you can. But effectively what's happening is it's like tying one arm behind your back and just fighting with the other. You're effectively handicapping yourself because you're going against the intent of the design of the game. Does that make it bad? No, but does it soften a couple of wins? For sure, as I'm healing myself and then I have my Mimic tier in the corner getting the life beat out of him. I'm just like, yep, sucks to suck, dude. I'm healing up, I'm buffing up. Sounds good. Keep doing that over there. Yeah, I think the game does promote summon use, for sure. Again, can you beat it without it? Yes, but it 100% wants you at times to summon. In one instance, that's fine. The summons in this game are sick. There are some really cool ones. I love the marionette soldier ashes as they like rotate their torso and just unload a ton of arrow shots. That's cool. The Mimic tier is awesome. You're summoning a clone of yourself. And this is also great because it makes the game, as you get these higher level summons, much more beginner friendly. However, there were just a time too many that when I beat a boss, I went, I feel like I didn't do much there. I felt like I was just hitting them while they were distracted. And that kind of tailors into when you get to the second half of the game, you start to see an overuse of the same bosses over and over. In the first half of the game, as myself and many reviewers celebrate this game, it doesn't really follow a template. And even at the end of the game, it really doesn't follow a template. In fact, it creates the template. However, you're going to start to see some of the same bosses over and over again. You're going to see the Black Assassins. You're going to see the Gargoyles. You're going to see the Dragons again. And each of them will have slight permutations that make them different. But for the most part, they are the same. Now, I'm not sitting here requesting that From Software handcrafts a brand new boss for every encounter, but I am of the mindset that sometimes less is more. There were just certain parts of the game that I did feel a minor bit of fatigue setting in. There was never a point I was like, I'm going to stop. I need a break. I never wanted a break. But there were points where I'm like, you again. And then you beat them up again. It's like, well, that wasn't that satisfying either. So sometimes the game's depth of content can undercut the satisfaction of completing a challenge, which is what I think these games are all about. Again, this game's still super tough, so I'm not too beat up about it, but it's still, I think, a fair criticism to have on the boss design front. Now let's talk about outside of the bosses, the dungeons you're going to be exploring, the mobs you're going to be encountering. Some of these mobs are outright spammy. Dark Souls 2 level spammy. And I know some people don't want to hear that. From Software has made one of the greatest games ever made. They don't want to hear Dark Souls 2 in the same sentence as that. I understand and respect that. But there are moments in this game where it's just like they are showering you with attacks and 10 enemies at once. And there's no other way but forward through that group. This is something, again, where I feel like the game trips up on itself trying to go, hey, you like challenges, right? And they just sucker punch you. It's like, okay, yes, but I like a challenge that I don't know, feels somewhat manageable would probably be the best way to put it. This goes hand in hand with probably the worst dungeon in the game, the Hero's Graves. Some of them are fun, where you'll have like a shadow mechanic that you'll see and you'll have to bring the enemy into the light. That's legitimately fun and felt different compared to the other catacombs you'd explore. But then there are Hero's Graves where you're just getting run over by chariots, and it's like, oh, okay. Oh, and they're one-shots as well. So you'll bust out the wondrous physic and you'll get yourself to be able to take at least a kill shot. But even then, it's like, this is not fun. This is not challenging. This is just kind of you annoying me. And again, you go back to what I said at the top with Miyazaki's quote. They just want you to die in fun ways and have stories to tell. Some not good, some good, but their goal was to make it fun. Some deaths in this game, when it comes to the mobs, and as well as the chariots in those heroes dungeons, are just not fun. And while I'm just on a roll here, those godforsaken sewers, oh my goodness. This brought me back to like Dark Souls 1, where I was just trekking blindly through Blighttown. I'm like, where am I? This is endless. I'm confused. I'm gonna die at any moment now. And I spent way too long down here. It is an optional area, which is good because you don't have to play through it. But I played almost all the optional content in this game because I couldn't get enough. Arriving here, it was like the one time outside of some of that boss fatigue where I was like, this is brutal. This takes some serious willpower to get through, because it is one of those FromSoft dungeons that you may know what I'm talking about in the old Dark Souls days, where you are out there for like an hour trying to find your shortcut back. And when you do, it is that sigh of relief. But again, it kind of, I feel, undercuts some of the progress they've made as developers, where they can still provide that feeling, albeit a bit more frequently, where you're not just going through a dungeon for an hour and you're lost and then you die and you have to find your ruins where they were lost and then be lost again, and then finally you find your way back. I also had some trouble with the camera and some of the bigger bosses. Some of them would outright glitch and just get up to areas they weren't supposed to, and when you combine that with the camera on big enemies just completely clipping into your own character's butt, I thought that this could be a bit annoying. The solution to this is just not locking on, but sometimes with the way the camera's positioned, you can see the breadth of attacks that are about to come your way, whether they be spells or melee attacks. It gives you the ability to react. So on one instance, you handicap yourself with the camera. On the other instance, you handicap yourself by limiting your field of view, but you don't die because of the camera. You'll die because you got blindsided by an attack you couldn't see because you were locked on. Again, this is something that kind of comes with the territory. When they make these bosses so big, it's like they kind of just expect you to deal with the idea that the camera will suck at times. And especially in the Fire Giant, this was one instance where I was like, oh my god, I'm just fighting with the camera more than this boss. I also got to throw out there that the performance just never got better. It didn't matter where I was playing, the performance never got better. This was a shame, because if that performance were better, I think all these criticisms, I probably wouldn't even bother mentioning in this video, but it just validated them, because in those instances where the frames drop and you die, and the camera messes up and you die, it underpins the idea that the game failed you. It's not that you died because of the challenge, it's because the game failed you. So I know throughout this critical section of the video, a lot of people are going to think that I'm being whiny and I'm not good enough for the game. You know, I've seen it all before, don't worry. But the idea is that there are moments that I'm describing here where the game fails you. And with a game this challenging, that's kind of the catch-22, is that you go bigger, you're going to have more holes to plug in, because there's going to be more problems and balancing issues. And they've done a really remarkable job with it. But there are, I'd say, a little bit too many instances where the game does fail me. Now, where the game doesn't really fail you, as I said earlier, was build flexibility. But I mentioned how sometimes you're fighting with one arm tied behind your back, and that is with the summons. So after I beat the game as a faith build, which I absolutely loved with my blasphemous blade, I had so much fun with that. It felt great. It was awesome. I then tried the blood builds that I've been hearing about, because proccing bleeding in this game is like otherworldly from just my brief experience with it, but I was never a dex build, so I didn't get to experience it much. I tried it out, and the amount of damage at this moment in time of recording that you can wallop on an enemy in quick succession is insane. Bleeding is broken in this game. It is one of those moments where once I beat the game as a faith build and tried this, I went, wow, there are so many fights that I struggle with that I wonder if I had this build, I would have had less trouble with. I think it is a flex for the game to be able to say they did this, but I do wonder if bleeding is going to get tweaked in the future on a damage output when you do proc that bleeding, because right now it just seems to me like the best way to play. Like just getting yourself a bleeding weapon, swinging away with something that has high attack speed, or a weapon that does decent damage with seppuku on it, just swinging away and proccing that bleeding constantly. Don't get me wrong, there are other ways to go about it. There are knockdowns that you can do that completely eviscerate bosses. That's how I actually took on Millennia. I just kept knocking her down over and over and over and over, and man, did that feel good. You know it if you know it. That felt amazing. So there are ways you can play that don't need to necessarily go into that style, but I just feel like this is the most beginner friendly. This is probably the best way to play the game. And what I've always liked about these previous Souls games is I never thought there was a best way to play. Of course, there's like Demon Souls where they like magic, and I feel like this game has a bit of, at times, intelligence favory, like with the way they dole out spells, but in the late game, the incantations balanced out, so I was like, maybe I'm wrong about that. But then you see bleeding, you're like, never mind, I take it all back. There is a favorite here. Last bit of criticism I really got for this game is I feel like they should have put some type of journal just to track your journey in this game in a way that was your characters speaking to themselves. Not a quest log, not waypoints, none of that. I feel like the game being free of that really reinvents open world design, and it's such a much appreciated strength where I even looked at a game like Horizon Forbidden West, which looks phenomenal, and I'm kind of looking in from the outside, ready to walk in thinking, oh man, I don't like how much HUD and updates I'm getting on the screen. Like, am I already tainted by Elden Ring? Oh boy. But I do think this game could have benefited from just a journal or a log telling you, hey, this person is in the east and they're waiting for me there. And, you know, if you ended up not completing that quest in time, it tells you that quest has failed or it's over or they're not there anymore. So you don't go wandering saying, where are they? Oh, I didn't beat this obscure quest over in the northwest corner of the map to unlock this thing in the east at this particular boss point. It's just too vague. The strength of that vagueness is that there's going to be a lot of discovery in this game years down the line. That is awesome. But I think it comes at the cost of the player, which, as you can probably tell here by some of my criticisms, isn't something I'm in favor of. So overall, those are just my list of things that I would critique about Elden Ring after 100 hours. Is it enough to override all the good it does as a video game? Absolutely not. I mean, this game is still absurdly incredible. I can't believe it's real. It is still a game that I'm coming back to well after 100 hours, well after beating it, well after the review cycle. All of those are complete anomalies in most video game coverage. It's like you beat it, you love it, you hate it, you move on, you might come back a time or two, but the amount of times I've come back, the amount of enjoyment I found in this game, the amount of replayability in this game is incredible. Because I haven't even talked about that. New Game Plus in this game kicks ass. It is awesome. You know, everything carries over, everything's a little bit stronger, but you really feel the power curve now. Like your build is good to go, and it is an awesome feeling. The last time I did this was Bloodborne, where I went through the game 3 times. 3 times. Awesome feeling. Awesome feeling. So I absolutely still adore Elden Ring. It's still, to me, if you haven't decided yet, is a complete buy. I know a lot of you have already made up your mind. This is more so a piece for me to get my thoughts out entirely on Elden Ring. But I did walk away after 100 hours with a little bit more complaints than I had kind of expected going in there. So I'm sure a lot of people will have some issues with that, but I still love the game. So there's that. Easily a front runner for Game of the Year. It's going to be tough to knock it off its pedestal, so time will tell on who steps up to the challenge there. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you're thinking about Elden Ring in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.